Hey, I'm PJ Walsh.
And I'm Sam Pressler.
Welcome to In Stitches Podcast, the podcast where we explore humanity and humor. Today's guest is Dion Flynn. You might recognize Dion from over 100 appearances on The Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon, where he portrays former President Barack Obama. Dion really opens up in this episode, Sam. I really appreciate everything that he brings to the table.
Absolutely. He breaks down humor in its fullness in a way that I've never heard anyone before. He uses this through line of kind of humor as a means to build connection and similarity in moments of distance from his childhood all the way up to today. And you kind of explore humor as a through line throughout his life.
And on a personal note, Dion directed me in a one-man show, Over There, Comedy's Best Weapon, which was all about my own life. So he's the guy I trusted with my own personal story. So I'm very excited to share his story with everybody. And on this episode, he's doing it from the basement of his apartment in Brooklyn because his son's being homeschooled upstairs and using all the bandwidth because we're in the middle of this lockdown. So he really is a trooper through this whole thing.
That's right. The resilience, bouncing back. So I know Dion's been a great friend to PJ. He's been a really awesome friend to me. And we're really excited to have Dion Flynn on the In Stitches podcast.
Dion, how are you?
How are you doing, buddy?
I'm doing good, man. It's been about a year since I've seen you, so it's great to hear your voice.
Yes, it's great to hear you. It was great to see you earlier. Folks that are listening aren't going to understand unless I tell them that we were on a video link for a little while, and then we had to deal with some stuff. Boy, all of this technology that's in our lives now because of this pandemic is crazy. My son is learning from remote. It's like everyone's got a Zoom profile. I mean, I had a nightmare the other night that I was carpooling to a Zoom meeting.
Homeschooling's the new thing. That's yeah. I think teachers are going to be really, really much more valued when this all slows down. You know, people are going to really understand them more.
That's right. That's exactly right. And oh man, it's good. I mean, we're making it. How are you doing? How are you holding up in all this?
I'm fine. Once you've been in the military, like you've been, this is if you've been on deployment, it's like stay inside. We can tell you when to go out and what to wear. Okay, got it. Yeah. So I'm just following those rules. And on my end, this is the most time I got to spend with my wife in the past 2 years because I've been traveling so much. So I'm not gonna. I'm trying to look at the bright side, but. And then it gave us, Sam and myself, time to really create this podcast. Sam came to me and, it's actually an extension of how we got to know each other because I got to know you because I went searching for a director after doing 2 years of theater school for my one-man show. And I sent out a whole bunch of... What's that? Can I give it a backstory on how awesome you are?
Please do. I just wanted to jump. You can always, yes. You always shut me up if you're about to talk about how awesome I am. Yes, I'm quiet. I'm quiet.
Well, so with how I got to know you is I was at the point where I had kind of drafted a one-man show and I needed a director, and I sent out like a letter, like a thick questionnaire to a whole bunch of different names I've been given for directors, like 14 different people. And then you came back with like a 3-page detailed breakdown of my comedy, what you think you can do, all this, like just really detailed research. And I got on the phone with you and I was like, this is a guy. This is a guy right here. You exuded so much where I felt like I wanted to tell a sensitive story. I wanted to tell a story that just wasn't just, I just came off touring with the blue collar guys and, I was in the military and I wanted to be able to open up more than I ever had. And you walked me through that process better than anybody could have.
I appreciate that. And I only cut you off because I'm just so eager to tell everyone that when I first was poking through PJ's, online material and his look, he's got this he's got this crew cut and he looked even more like the guy from the Terminator, the first Terminator, Patrick.
Yeah.
What's his name?
T-1000, Robert Patrick.
Yeah, Robert Patrick. Yeah, he looked like Robert Patrick. And I was like, does he know who he's writing to? Like, I didn't feel like he He was on the Blue Collar Comedy Tour. I'm African American, Irish, and like Celtic. Basically, I'm a Black Viking, and I didn't want him to, misunderstand who he was talking to, because I just assumed he was racist. I was like,
I mean, look, Dion. I mean, you're accurate. That's I've just hidden it from you from all these years. For the past 15 years, I've just hidden it from you.
Well, you've done a good job. He was on the Blue Collar Comedy Tour, and I was like, wait a minute, this guy wants to do a sensitive, sort of delving into his, I was like, all right, well, here's what's this, and that, and we'll see what we can do.
But look, dude, here's the deal. You and I could do this forever, but we're diving into your life and the artist and the journey that you had. And the thing that I appreciate, I know so much about you because, you gave me a copy of the film that you made about finding your real father. We spent so much time in a room together, just hashing out my life, which you always give me stories about your life. And then also I've watched your one-man show, and we've been friends forever. And so with this, you're probably one of the most talented people in so many different facets that I know, improv, acting, stand-up comedy, music. But where you came from is what this is what we really want to unpack, because you're somebody who took a lot of time to face your demons and to come to terms with them, and and find a lot of humor in it, because every story that you've told, everything that you've crafted, there's been pain involved. And right after the pain, all of a sudden there's just huge laughs, huge funny. And and that's what we're trying to do here. And so we'd really like to dive into, where it all started. I know the name of your one-man show, and, if you could just walk us through that.
Yeah, well, it all started for me way back, such a long time back. It's the trailer park. I mean, the solo show is the only brown kid in the trailer park, and I just had this sense that I was different than everybody. My mom was a white lady, and my real father I never met. Okay, my mom was 19. She had me. She married into this white family, so it's white mom, white new family, and then little brown me that came from some questionable experience that she had in the past. Questionable in that she wasn't 100% sure exactly what had happened, and wasn't really interested in giving straight answers. Now, it's not because she was a bad person. It's just she was young, and I think she just kind of hoped the whole thing would go away. And that my curiosity about, hey, Mom, how come the kids in the neighborhood are saying that I'm adopted, and the kids in the neighborhood would sort of surround me, at a certain point, and they'd be like, you're adopted. And I'd be like, no, I'm not. I'm totally ignorant to what's going on. I'm like the last to know. I'm like, they're seeing two white parents and a little brown kid with this, I look like a little version of Johnny Mathis, if you can imagine it. And they were like, well, you're clearly adopted. And I remember marching into my mother one day, because my mother would say, no, you're not. I didn't adopt you. My mother would just, if I questioned her, Mom, am I adopted? She would yank up her shirt and show me her stretch marks and say, you see this? And I'd say, yeah. She'd go, you did that to me. And I'd be like, yay, I'm legitimate, So, and then my dad, my adoptive father, he would say, I'm your real father. What he meant was he was talking about paperwork, like adoption paperwork, but he wasn't addressing the real issue, because to address the real issue would have brought up questions that nobody wanted to really deal with. And so I think what it did for me to navigate around that southern trailer park. Now, this is the deep South, and I'm in New York right now. By the deep South, I mean Maryland, which is about 2 hours and 40 minutes from here. But I got to tell you, in the 70s, it is the deep South. When you're brown skinned and it's an all white neighborhood, it is the deep South, because people are prejudiced, and they are trained to be prejudiced, and they don't have any black friends. And the music is country, and the tobacco is chewed, and things like that. And so I'm navigating this environment. trying to fit in, trying to do what you do as a kid, have some fun. And I, so I just learned how to do like voices, and I would watch TV very intensely. My parents, they let me watch a lot of TV, and the TV kind of raised me. I would put my mother's tri-folding pattern cutting board around the TV in a semicircular fashion, and then put one of her handmade Afghans over top of the whole assembly. And I made a little movie theater. The TV's inside there. I'm in there with a snack or like, Doritos or something. And I'm just in there watching Bugs Bunny or MASH or Good Times and that's when I first saw ancestors that I could relate to. I was like, okay, I don't know really my blood ancestors, but there's an ancestry of these people in front of me on TV, which that's me. People that like to wear wigs and false noses and entertain, and they're very funny and they're getting attention. And we're all watching them. We're all in the trailer paying attention to this one lighted end of the room, which is the television. Fast forward years later, I'm on television. I'm doing comedy at one lighted end of the room. But it's all about that getting of attention and, saying I'm here and I'm of value. And, I wanted to be whatever I needed to be to make people like me, make people love me, I needed something. I had a big, big need for love and attention and nurturance, and I wasn't getting enough of it. Now, whether that was some lack that was pre-existing in me just molecularly, or whether it was due to the situation I was in, or, I would go on to have, addiction issues. I've been sober for 22 years now, but I was an active addict for a long time. Whether it was an addict sort of thing going on that just needed more and more and more, I don't know. Who knows? But there I was. And I find that when I speak to people, whether they're addicts, I work with recovering addicts, and I work with just corporate people, whatever, whenever I speak nakedly and openly about that just naked desire to be loved and the desire to do whatever you had to do to, just fool people into believing for a little while that you're not you, because I thought that what I was awful. I just thought it was unlovable. I would hear the N word, and that word coming from someone who was trying to tell you something awful about yourself that they had been taught. Someone who's trying to use that word to convey this message of there's something about you that is automatically unacceptable, completely beneath love and contempt, even contempt. You get that. You feel it. It's like it's a channel. That word vibrates at this frequency where this whole American history is trying to be communicated, and it's captured inside that one word. And when I would hear that word from some people, I knew they were trying to say the worst thing you could possibly say about another person, whatever that was. But the basis of it was distance. It was distancing. You get away from me. I don't have anything to transact with you. And it socked me in the gut when I was young.
Dion, can I jump in there? I'm really interested in you using that word distance. And I find it I find it really interesting that you felt this distance, and what you did, what your instinctual coping mechanism was to turn to humor, which is something that PJ and I know often talk about as something that, like, when we laugh, we lean into one another. There's a proximity that's almost involved in the idea of humor and laughter. And I'm just wondering, like, how was that experience for you turning to humor? Was that a natural thing? How did it evolve over time? How did it relate to that distance? I'm interested in hearing your kind of thoughts and reflections on that.
Well, that's a very interesting thought, actually, that you just laid out. I don't know if I've ever thought of it in exactly that way. That's a good and interesting thought. I think that with that word, or words like it, that we use between ourselves that distance us, it basically says there's nothing about us that's the same. And yet that's what comedy is. It's this very obsessive, it's an obsessive way of thinking about what's similar between this thing and that thing. Mm-hmm. How is this like that? How is this analogous to that? How do you and I act when we are alone in the shower? That's similar. You know, a lot of observations. So the mundane observational comedy of the 70s was what we all do that's the same in grocery stores, or thoughts we all have that are the same. I remember PJ and I actually were working on his show. At some point we came up with this line that laughter is like the surprise recognition of, you know, similarity. It's like, oh, I think that too, which doesn't mean that it has to be rooted in truth. Like Jerry Seinfeld famously says that comedy doesn't have to be truthful, but I think it does. I think it does. And I think he's hilarious. And I think that things he says are not necessarily truthful per se, but the humor about them sometimes is the truth of the fact that that's ridiculously absurd. Like, I know that it's not true in and of itself, but the truth that I'm laughing at is that what you're saying is so absurd that I'd have to understand the truth to understand how far you're deviating from it right now. So I still believe that it's all rooted in a kind of truth and commonality. Mm-hmm. So, yeah. So, look, when you're feeling that kind of distancing and sock to the gut wounding and that vulnerability, like, wow, these people can hurt me. Two things happen, I think, to me at least. One is I want to be able to hurt people back. That's another one. And some of my comedy has been rooted, sarcasm, imitating people, mocking people. Yeah, there's nothing better than to just, if somebody said, in a meeting, just think how you can level somebody in a board meeting when someone goes, look, I think this meeting is going on too long. And someone goes, look, I think this meeting is going on too long. That's like elementary school mockery, but you can really get to somebody by doing that, you know, and kids know how to do it instantly.
You know,
so,
Dion,
yeah.
What, I didn't mean to cut you off. Did you have something to finish there?
Well, yeah, I just wanted to I wanted to just finish that idea that Sam raised about the distancing and the connection. When I felt cut off like that, when I felt so obviously different, it forced my mind into a whole other realm of existence. I was like, wait a minute. It forced me to understand people beyond the surface level. Because one of two things were true. Either what they were saying was true about me and that I was unlovable because just of what they could see on me on the outside, or there were deeper layers to people. Now, I couldn't have said this to you when I was 7 years old, but I had to make a decision. I didn't have a black family. I couldn't just say, oh, yeah, white people are just all jacked up. And I didn't have an all white family because of me. So I didn't have the comfort of just being like a white kid in a white family, just saying, well, all those people are that way. I was forced to deal with both sides all the time, and I couldn't make it go away. So it forced my mind into a deeper level of exploration, and I would say into the spiritual dimension, you know, that which is unseen but true. And so I began to think much more deeply about people, even when I was a young than I would have if I just had a sort of happy, let's go along with things lifestyle. And what it made me do was I would watch Klansmen, like the Ku Klux Klansmen, when they would be the guest on Phil Donahue. And I would listen very carefully for them to express something that they loved. Because I needed to understand that these people were not just full of hatred. So I would hear them and the people that lived around me. They would express things that they loved, like their grandchildren. You know, I don't want my grandchildren growing up and, you know, marrying this one or that one. Or they'd bring a little kid out in a Klansman outfit. What it caused me to do was search hungrily for something that I could build with in somebody else. A lot of people grow up in an abusive home. Let's say there's violence. I know a lot of people that are in comedy, improv, where you're in improv, you're learning how to build with whatever you're given. And even if that thing is zany or weird, you're learning how to very quickly build with it. Yes, and it, we call it in improv. Yes, anding offers. Well, if the offers that you're getting are crappy, you're going to build a really good muscle for learning how to deal with stuff that's not necessarily that good. You know, if you've got an abusive family, or what you're being offered is very limited love, or, you know, everyone's stingy with the love. So I don't think it's a coincidence that you find a lot of people who drink quite heavily and party a lot, but also have this other skill of being able to improvise or come up with, you know, make a whole room full of drunk people turn their mood at a moment's notice. I'm not saying everyone that is good, that's an entertainer, is a drug addict, or, you know, is something like that. But I will say it's kind of odd how, you know, you got Freddie Prinze who died, you've got, you know, John Belushi, you've got Chris Farley. You can just trace it again and again and again and again to these performers, fast thinkers, people that are forced to look at things from another angle, which is really comedy writing at its heart, is looking at something from another angle and then communicating that. A lot of time it comes from a deep trauma or a way of thinking where you had to translate your environment very rapidly to make it make a kind of sense. And what's left over from having to do that to survive is this surplus of a skill set, which you can make use of if you're lucky enough to live long enough to make use of it.
Mm. So we've talked about like certain things, and when I hear you tell that perspective, I know when I'm thinking about young Dion, he's a kid, and I know that you're living in one world. Like, your extended family didn't know the history, right? And then I know you have a great, not a great, but a painful, powerful story about your grandfather when he was watching Sanford and Son with you, and because he didn't know what the whole entire story was.
Right, exactly. I've got this old world Italian blood grandfather. This is my mother. She's Italian. She's Irish. Her father, Vincent Joseph Alascio, and he and I would watch television together. I would sit on his lap. I would sit near him. You know, he loved me. I have this dark skin. He doesn't know why. My mother told him I was Mexican. I'm actually African American, you know, and I've done the 23andMe test, you know, to find out a little bit more. What a racket that is, boy. Spit in a cup, can send me $200. I'll tell you where you're from. A little bit of garlic in there. You're Italian. So anyway, you know, so we're watching TV. He likes the old movies, the Bowery Boys and Gone with the Wind, and we're relating on these levels. But we're watching Sanford and Son one day, and I love Sanford and Son. I love Red Fox. I think he's outrageous, and he goes, boy, that N-word makes me laugh. Mm. And I looked to my mom. I was like, Mom, we're not supposed to say that word. He didn't live with us. He visited periodically. I was like, Mom, we're not supposed to say that word in this house, right? I thought you said we were supposed to say that word. Remember when I came home a few weeks ago and I said, Mom, what does this word mean? You told me we're not supposed to say it. And she was like, my mom burst into tears and she sent me to my room. Mm. I get sent to my room. That's what a crappy deal that was. I mean, if I start crying, I get sent to my room. What seems like an eon later, my mom comes down to the door and she goes, Shannon, my name's Shannon Dion Flynn. And before the age of 17, I went by Shannon. So she goes, Shannon, do you remember? Okay, let me explain. Do you know how I sometimes call you a penguin? And I was like, yeah. And she was like, well, you're black and white, and I never really told your grandfather till today. I told him just now. But up until today, I told him you were Mexican. And I'm just like, what am I supposed to do with all of this information? So we drive him home later that day down to Baltimore, 22 miles southwest to Baltimore from where we lived in rural Hartford County, Maryland. And he hugs me to the side as we're dropping him off. And he hugs me. He said, I love you no matter what. And that was it. That was the only time he ever told me that he loved me. And he just dealt with it. And what happened in that moment was what happened many, 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 many times in my life, where I was paddling very quickly in an environment with all white people, and they were having a hard time rectifying what they had been taught about black people or dark-skinned people or brown people, and what they were experiencing with me. What they were experiencing with me was, we're laughing at the same jokes. We are having fun. And yet they've been told this thing on television and in the news and in the prison statistics and through, whatever their information sources were, parents. And it's jarring with reality. And then I'm watching people's eyes sort of spin around and go like, well, I don't understand this, I'm prejudiced, but then there's you, and I have to understand, explain this to myself.
As a young boy, I had a great teacher, William Esper, and he said this quote, and I always think of this when you talk about this, and when you were a kid, and it's he said, "It's okay to be ignorant. It's not okay to stay." Mm-hmm. And I think as a kid, that's what you were witnessing. All this ignorance, but then there was clearly a love for you, and having to tackle with that with their own insights. And as a kid, that's can't help but form your way of thinking later in life.
Yeah, it's true. And I have compassion. Look, I've traveled too. I was in the Army as well. And I was in the service. I was in the Army, and I traveled all over the world. Look, I went to Korea myself, and I would look at the people. We had Katusas, which are Koreans augmented to the U.S. Army. So there were soldiers working side by side with us who were Korean. It was a complete culture shock. I didn't think the women were attractive. I didn't understand. And then you're there for a while, and then you start to go roam around, and you make friends with the Katusas, and you go down range, as we called it. I was right on the border of North Korea and South Korea at Camp Greaves. And I, go down on the weekends and go into town, and, you get yourself, you dance with some girls and whatever else you do, which I'm not going to, I have a son now, so I can't talk about everything.
Right. Yeah. But I have a wife now, Dion. I get it. I got a wife now. I'm like, I'm not going to be telling that story anymore.
Yeah. You gotta cut some things from the act. But it changed. It completely changed, where I was like, wow, I absolutely see the charm and the beauty in the people, both physically, beautifully attractive women, and I see the friendship in the men. And it's just amazing to watch your own prejudice melt away, And I always know what prejudice is about. It's praejudicia. It's to judge something before the fact. Before the facts are in, I'm going to judge it just by what I see. And, if all I did was sit around and watch cops and didn't leave at my county, and somebody wanted to take away my weapons, and the marauding horde, which has always been just around the corner and over the horizon and used to keep people frightened, was about to come into my county, yeah, I would have those thoughts too. Yeah. And I think that's how you get into being an actor, because I can understand many, many different points of view, and I can play them. And
Dion, I think that's actually a really good segue point. I am interested in hearing what led you. So you were in the Army, but you had this eye toward comedy and acting. So what led you to choose that path? Kind of how did you get your start? And we can kind of go from there.
I'll tell you, there was a night I wanted to save my family. And I watched a movie where Judy Garland and her sister, the Gum sisters, were singing, and they made it big, and they saved their family. And I went down the end of the trailer to my mom. I was watching in the living room, and I said, Mom, would it be possible for us to move to Hollywood, 2,900 miles away? And she didn't say no. She said, maybe. Because I laid out the plan for her. I was going to get us out of that trailer, and I was going to become famous, and I was going to save us. And then I was 17. That would have been age 10 or so. It was a made-for-TV movie. Then at age 17, I ran away from home and ran 2,900 miles away to California with kind of a Frankensteinian plan in my head, because some of it was very selfish. I just wanted to get high. I wanted to take pills and smoke weed, and I wanted to do it without anybody stopping me. And I also wanted to be a star. So that's what informed Hollywood. So I ran away to California. I had a buddy of mine in high school, and I was going to go away to he was going to go away to the Air Force. And I was just going to go run away and be a star. And he was going to go say goodbye to his mother before he went to the Air Force. He said, I'll escort you out there. So I went out there and was, very quickly homeless and on the streets and lost. I was overweight. I was a compulsive eater. So I was eating a lot. I weighed like between 280 and 300 pounds.
Wow.
And when I went out there, I lost 100 pounds on what I call the hitchhiking and cocaine plan, which I do not recommend. I mean, it takes care of the physical malady, but it doesn't address any of the inner work that you need to do. So you're
very 70s, by the way. Very 70s. Cocaine and hitchhiking were big in the 70s and 80s.
Oh, man, yeah, big time. And I was right there in the zeitgeist. And so there's that. And, so I'm out there, and I've got no real plan, Sam. I got no real plan. I'm 17 years old. I don't know how to do basic things. And I'm doing my best to just survive. And, but I had a couple brushes with fame and some leads that sort of petered out because of the addiction stuff. I couldn't follow through. And I could have very easily just been one of those kids that fell in and found a pack of pedophiles to sort of shepherd me through to stardom or something. But luckily that didn't happen. I ended up leaving Los Angeles with a pack of friends and hitchhiked up to Seattle, lost that weight, went to Seattle, was panhandling outside. I remember I would sing outside, for money, sing outside of this Safeway in Seattle. And if I saw a white person coming, I'd sing a white person song. If I saw a black person coming, I'd sing a black person song. So I was like I was weaving in and out, And I remember one day a guy just goes like, why don't you get a freaking job? And I was like, all right. So I did. And I joined a gang. And when I say gang, I mean the Army. Actually, the Army was the street gang. But if you think about it, the Army is a gang. Everybody wears the same colors. We're all protecting our turf. Everybody's got a weapon. So I joined the Army, and a lot of stuff happened in between, as with most stories. But as far as entertainment goes, I share this with TJ. We have this in common, because this is what happens. You've got this talent that's bubbling up inside of you. And I started making the guys laugh. I started making the other soldiers laugh. And I thought to myself, wow, there's something here. I would sing. My drill sergeants in basic training, we're all freezing in these 2-man tents where you sort of button together your shelter half, and we're freezing. And I got to go into the heated drill sergeant tent because my drill sergeant liked the way I sang so much. So I got inside there and I would sing the drill sergeants to sleep and got to sit in the heat. And I'm singing Beatles songs and taking requests and doing whatever. This is for white and black drill sergeants, So talent gets you rewards. I started to see talent really gets you rewards. It makes you friends. And it wasn't, given the story that I've just unfolded, it's obviously not the first time I realized that it could make you friends. But I did realize something new, that you could get people from all over, all different types of neighborhoods and backgrounds. It's a melting pot of sorts. You've got educated officers, you've got very smart, but not necessarily college educated, enlisted men. And they're from Texas, and they're from small towns. They're from all over. And you can appeal with humor to all these different people. I was like, wow, there's something here. And I started to notice that imitating, like I remember I could imitate my drill sergeants really well, like to the extent that I could fool people into thinking it was them. I had a drill sergeant who, what did he say? He said this during, he said this. They're yelling at you in basic training, and they're screaming things in your face. And he made the terrible mistake of saying, he meant to say, you think you're funny, private. You one of those privates that want to start trouble. Then we're gonna nip this in the bud. Nip this in the bud, being a gardening term. You know, pruning something while it's still at the bud state so that it ends. But instead, what he said was, private. Oh, you wanted them trouble. You wanted them troublemaking private. I'm gonna tell you right now, right in my face. We're gonna sniff that right in the butt. And I made a career out of that phrase for weeks. Oh, yeah, you want to start some trouble? We're going to sniff that right in the butt. And you can't laugh right in a drill sergeant's face, of course. But there's nothing better. There's nothing better than trying not to laugh when a drill sergeant is saying things in front of you, saying things to you. Let me give you another example of basic training where humor emerged. Okay. So I was bold. Now, I had been a runaway, so I had been on the streets. Some of these guys hadn't. We're not allowed to have any candy in basic training. I'm also a compulsive eater who hasn't really gotten the help that he needed to cure that addiction. So I'm not eating candy, but I really, really want some. So I gather all the guys together and get their laundry quarters, 55 guys in this bay. I said, give me your quarters. I'm going to go to the off-limits candy machine. I'm going to go get candy. And I went to that candy machine. I cleared it all out. I mean, even the bullshit candy like Chuckle that are always just in there and dusty. I cleared all the candy out and I brought it all back. And the drill sergeant, same drill sergeant, stopped me and he goes, whoa, where are you going? And I was like, my laundry? This is my laundry. He was like, you better get in here. And I emptied out the laundry sack. It was full of candy. And he was like, what are you thinking? What in the hell are you thinking? And he said he was going to go get Drill Sergeant Francisco. Drill Sergeant Francisco was the most feared drill sergeant in basic training. Filipino, pockmarked face, dragon tattoo running up one leg, tiger tattoo running down the other leg. Everyone was terrified of him, and he went to go get him. And I had a moment to stand there and think. And I was like, and my whole life sort of flashed in front of me. Here I am, and I don't know what to say to this guy, and I'm not going to make a joke. I just decided to tell him the truth. He comes back down, and I'm expecting Drill Sergeant Francisco. He doesn't bring him down. He says, what the fuck were you thinking? And I just pulled up my shirt 9 or 10 inches, just like my mom had with me, showed him my stretch marked, deflated belly, and showed him, the weight I had lost, through the hitchhiking and cocaine plan. And I said, Drill Sergeant, I said, and I had never said this before. I said, whenever I got into trouble or had a tough moment, I would deal with my problems with food. Mm-hmm. And I was crying. Mm. Now, this guy knew drill and ceremony, but he did not know how to deal with a crying 19-year-old man and boy. And he was like, all right, get on out of here. And, I grabbed my laundry bag, and just for a second, I looked at him, looked at the candy, looked back at him as if all had been forgiven. And can I take this with me too? And he was like, you better get the fuck out of here. And I got out and that was it. So it's funny because I set this up like I was going to tell you about using humor, but it was actually it's funny now. Like now there are funny elements to that story, but there was nothing funny at the time. And I just laid the truth out there for him. And he showed mercy. He showed mercy because I was vulnerable, I think.
Yeah, and here's my question on that, because I was in the military, and you're going to have that pushback. You're going to have that person in the military who's like, you don't fucking get that, and they draw a line in the sand. But once you left the military, your addictions continued, and pretty much up until you were in the master program at Tisch, right?
Yes.
So can you walk us through that part of the journey? And because, like I said, you're one of these people who has faced these and really give a lot of thought and time into why these happened and how do I face them and move past it. So throughout that period, what was that journey like?
Well, I got out of the military, and just before I got out of the military, I knew how to play guitar. I had been working on that, and I was like, I want to go to school for something. I need to go to school. I gathered while I was in the Army that people that go far will go to school. I hadn't really had like a big college, background. My parents and stuff, they weren't big into college, and so I pieced that much together. So I called Schenectady County Community College, my last duty station. I was in the 10th Mountain Division in New York. And I was like, okay, that's close by. I had a girlfriend at the time, and she and I were going to like move down to live near her mother, which was in the Schenectady, Albany area. And this changed my entire life. You just never know why certain people and certain decisions come into your life. So I called a school that was going to be near where we were going to move to Albany. And I called up Schenectady County Community College. And if they had said, what do you mean? You just call in here to find out, how you can go to college here. If somebody had been mean or not nice to me, I probably would have been scared and postponed it, but they were nice. And they were warm, and they said, yes, we have a music program here, and we could probably find a place for you here, and you'd come and audition with your guitar. And I happened to have a classical guitar anyway, and they had a classical music program. And so, it was one phone call. It was basically the first place I called, and I was like, okay. And I went there for 3 semesters, and while I was going there, the drama teacher, I got involved in the drama club. I was like, oh, yeah, that's right. I did have this ambition for acting that I kind of lost the thread of. She said, damn, I did an impersonation and some accents. And she said, you got one. She goes, you got one hell of an ear, kid. She goes, you might want to consider changing majors. That's all she said. You might want to consider changing majors. Well, I mean, I didn't have anybody that was like looking after my artistic person. Nobody, throughout all this time. So a little tiny bit of direction was very helpful, And she said that, and I did, and I switched. And I joined the Schenectady County Community College drama department. And I did 3 semesters there. And then I knew I needed to go on to a 4-year thing. So I called SUNY Albany on the phone. I just called and said, hey, I'd kind of like to finish my degree and go there. And someone greeted me, and I was able to transfer, and I went there. Now, when I was at Schenectady County Community College, in the lobby of the drama department, there was an advertisement for a local television comedy show. And it was taking talent, people that had never been on TV before, all newcomers welcome in the Albany area. And I said, I got to get over there. I got to try for this. And a bunch of us tried, and I got in. I got into the cast of this thing. Well, to my left of the 10 people in that cast, one of the cast members who became a good friend of mine was one James Thomas Fallon. You might know him as Jimmy Fallon. And he and I would do voices and make recordings, and we watched the O.J. Simpson run together on the couch at our friend Frank Gentile's house, and we just became buddies. I mean, he was so inventive and so creative and so clearly a star right there, right from the beginning, that we were, we were friends. We just had a creative affinity with each other. We liked to make things up and just keep going and generating and improvising, and we wouldn't stop. And so there was that. Became good friends. I left the Albany area. I left Albany, graduated with my bachelor's degree. My parents came to my graduation. It was a great moment of pride. And I auditioned for the graduate acting program at NYU. And I got in. And I was like, oh my gosh, wow. Okay, so there's 20 people get into this program. And while I was there, you know, Mahershala Ali was there and Sterling K. Brown was there. There were some really top-notch people there in my cohort. And I bring that up because of something that happened. I was still using drugs. I was still partying. And this is my first year of this graduate acting program. I leave Albany. I come down to New York City. Jimmy goes off to California. And the head of the program, Zelda Fitchandler, the founder of the Arena Stage, this grand dame of the American theater, the regional theater, calls me into her office. She's the head of our program at NYU. And she says, now remember, I do impersonations, so this is her voice exactly. She says, why are you missing so much school? Now, by so much school, she means the day and a half that I missed before Thanksgiving vacation. Now, something had happened just before Thanksgiving vacation, and it was an escalation in my drug and alcohol use. And here's what happened. I called my family down in Maryland, and I said, family, I'm not going to be able to come home for Thanksgiving. I've got obligations here at school. Hang up. I called school and I said, school, I have to leave early and go home for Thanksgiving. I lied to the two entities in this world that really knew or cared about where I was. And that's an escalation in the addictive cycle where you make it so nobody can account for you. And then I disappeared and then I escalated and I went a real big bender, and that led to me missing school. And they were really concerned. The calling in those days and then missing a few days after this really epic weekend binge. She calls me in. She says, why are you missing so much school? And I said, I thought to myself, I was like, all right, just you leveled with that drill sergeant. This is one of those times you just got to level with the person. And I said, I think I have a drug and alcohol problem. And she sat back and her shoulders relaxed and she breathed. And she said, oh, well, then we'll get you help. And she didn't get me help necessarily, but I found the help that I needed. But at that moment, I really did care about being there. And because I cared about being there, I was willing to change. And I have been sober. I relapsed 5 months after that meeting with her because I didn't get, a deep level of help that I needed, but I got it in May of 97. And I've been sober ever since. That's my sobriety date. And so you have never experienced anything, Dion, until I'm now going by Dion ever since age 17. I'm probably 27 at this point. And I had never experienced anything like being sober in the middle of an intense graduate acting program. It was harder than the Army. The Army was hard. The graduate program was just like the Army in its rigor, in the hours, the physical discipline, but you had to also be emotionally open. They were also demanding that you be emotionally open. Nobody gave a shit if you were emotionally open in the Army. In fact, they wanted you to be closed down emotionally. So this was the hardest thing I'd ever gone through. And so that was the next piece of it.
That's so interesting because to me, as an outsider, not having heard your story in this way before, it sounds like the experience in the Army, you drew on humor a lot. And that was a way for you to kind of avoid and escape your experience in some regards, right? You were able to still continue with some of your habits and with some of the kind of negative coping mechanisms that you had. But then when you got into acting school, you couldn't escape anymore. You had to confront the reality. And I think that is such an interesting commentary on how humor can be a limitation and how kind of looking something right in the eye might be what you need at certain points of time.
Well, you're touching on a really, really interesting nexus, of the two philosophies, or probably 30 philosophies about that. And I'll just try to put it into an anecdote. Rabbi, how come every time we ask you a question, you answer with a story? Well, there was this guy. Because it just illuminates things better. 2003, I went to a codependency rehab, and somebody confronted me at the end of it. One of the other members, it was a live-in, it was an inpatient thing, and I'm dealing with lifelong codependency, which is one of the side, ailments that sort of grows up right alongside alcoholism and growing up in an addictive family system. And so I was there, and I was going through, and I was crying, and I was having my real feelings. But I was joking to a degree that upset one of the people in the group. And on the last day, we're getting ready to leave. And he goes, "You joke too much. You should probably stop joking and just deal with like all your pain and your feelings." And, I was like, "I'll kick your ass." I'm thinking, you want to see me not funny, let's go there then. But I never forgot that guy, and the trigger that I felt emotionally told me that there was some truth to what he was saying. And there's truth to what you're saying. There, I saw a great poster one time. It had a pencil on it. It said, "To you, this is a pencil. To a prisoner of war, this was a torture device." So don't ever assume that an object is what it is to you, that what an object is to you, or what a practice is to you, is the same thing to someone else who's been abused with it. Prayer is very powerful to me. Some people have been abused by it, don't believe in it, whatever. So I don't assume these things. Humor is, to me, the same thing. It's like fire. Cook a meal, burn a village. You can do great things with it, or you could do terrible things with it. Now, what I have to advocate for, though, is that, Sam, I'm not sure I could have survived full-on reality at an earlier time. I needed to mitigate and filter and turn reality. It gives you a hit of dopamine when you laugh, when you cause laughter in others. That's why it's so appealing to be around people who are funny. They can literally kill pain. We say laughter is the best medicine. My mother loved humor. My mother was hilarious. My mother was the one who, on her deathbed, from her own addictions and a life of addictions, 27 years of pain medication that escalated to morphine for the last 4 years. She died at the age of 54. And on her deathbed, as she was dying, she said to me, she picked up one of her credit cards. She was like, "If you want to charge these up, now would be the time."
Oh, God.
So that's how we deal. That's how we dealt with things, and comedians say this all the time. If we're at a funeral, like, that's who I want to be around, is the funny people, the people who are gathering that perspective sooner rather than later. Now, yes, there are times when, if there's a tragedy and I am immediately laughing about it, there's a chance I have skipped some processing. Okay, I would be the first one to tell you that. But here's what you have with comedians is that, Mel Brooks' famous thing of, a tragedy is when I cut my finger with a piece of paper. A tragedy is when I get a paper cut. Comedy is when you fall into a sewer hole and die, right? It's happening to you. So the distance can either be it happened a long time ago and now we can look at it with humor, or it's distant because it's not affecting me personally, which is what he's pointing to with that. However you create that distance, I think a comedian who has had to, however he got there, is thinking like a joke writer, to turn it, to put a surprise ending on it, to make some perspective, smart view, perspicacity, and spectate, to view, to put the smart view on it, puts distance on it. We say too soon from the audience. We literally can get an audience to say too soon if what that person is proclaiming is they're saying, we haven't had enough proper time to emotionally deal with this. And you're already demanding that we have the smart view of it. But you're short-circuiting our natural process. And some people will say, thank God you're joking about it immediately because I don't want to go through that process. So what I'm positing here in my experience is that there are many ways to arrive at laughter. Mm-hmm. You can arrive at laughter where you have shortcut the processing, and people like to do that. And people will continue to do that as long as they need to use that as a tool. God bless them. I don't try to make people not do that. If somebody asks me to laugh about something that's not funny yet for me, or funny for me, I'm not going to laugh. I can't tell you how many times I laughed at racist jokes, which were painful, but I wanted them to be my friend, so I laughed anyway. There's nothing worse than that feeling of compromising your own values to laugh at something. Mm-hmm. So I get it, but God damn it, you cannot tell me not to deal with something painful in a funny way that's personal to me, because that's the best way I can get through it. And that's freedom of speech, you know. But you know, it's finally, and this is what I've had to think about this a lot in the last few weeks, because I've been asked to do a lot of these webinars about how to use humor. And what I say to people is, it's about an agreement. If you and I have an agreement that certain things about the coronavirus are funny, then that's wonderful. But if I'm saying these things and someone else is clearly cringing at this, I'm not going to continue in that direction with them. Mm-hmm. I'm going to either go to another topic, or I'm going to go to another audience, you know, or I'm going to stop it, because I'm not interested in, you know, hurting people or wounding people or causing people to suffer with what I, you know, think is funny, or with, you know, with my joke. So there's the agreement. And then the other tip that I add is, some people have had a lifetime of fitting difficult feelings through what I call the joke nozzle. You fit it through the joke nozzle. Not everything fits through the joke nozzle. Sometimes that's a really hard little spray, velocity. And it stings, and you could power wash something with it, because there's a lot of feelings trying to come through this tiny little aperture. Not everything fits through the joke nozzle. But if you are a person who has that inclination and can spin things quickly and gets perspective sooner than other people, you are needed by some other people who welcome it but don't know how to do it for themselves. Okay. Mm-hmm. And so I tell people, you know, there is permission to be funny in this climate. Well, you didn't lose anybody to the coronavirus. Yes, I did. My sponsor in my 12-step program, 78 years old, died. We gave him a 6.5-hour service on Zoom a week ago. Mm-hmm. So anybody who says I don't understand the deep personal loss and am talking about joking, I would offer at least that, you know, perhaps I do.
Yeah. PJ, jump in there.
Well, here's something that I've had it in my holster since we started this section, because this is why I consider you a brother, right? Because you looked at me a certain way when you saw what the surface was, right? And then when I listened to your story, now I've gotten to know you, you know, you mentioned that, you know, your teacher, this strong woman, showed you concern about your addiction, that your problems. Like for me, like we talked about, like what things we love about theater and comedy, and so you always get to see shades of yourself and people's experience. And as you're going through all of this, like when I quit drinking, the thing that propelled me to stop drinking was the funniest person in my life was my little sister. And I wasn't going to go out drinking one night, and I went out with her, and I was drinking like I was putting something out inside me, just dousing beers. Mm. And she looked at me and she goes, "Oh my God." And I heard that, "Oh my God." I saw that concern. And the next day I quit drinking because I knew there was something wrong. So a few years after that, much like you're saying, I decide to go to theater school. I'm going through my first year of theater school, where all you do is unearth all these things, you know, and I'm doing it sober, right? I don't get to go hide anywhere. And I think it was like my third day, and I tried to make a joke, and my teacher goes, "We've seen your resume. We know you're funny." this is not about being funny, right? So I spent
Wow.
2 years doing that, but it was true. I was like, all right, I've already proven my funny bone. And going through that entire that process, and when you go through it sober without anything to make you run from it, like I was crazy that year. I sat there, and you've met my father. My father's a hardworking Irish, off the boat Irish blue collar father. Like there was a certain point, he sat me in the car. He goes, you're being kind of a pussy. And how do I explain what I'm going through? But it was all these tiny little moments, and then it came to the time where, okay, I want to tell my story. I want to share this thing that happened to me. And the thing I kept saying to you when we sat down first, I go, I'm beyond comedy now. Like, I love stand up, and it's been great to me, but it's just not enough. And I laid out where I wanted to go. And there's a lot of hard parts of like my going over to entertaining the troops and a lot of really hard things. And we sat in a room together, and we just trusted that the funny would boil up. And I think that's the thing that Sam and I are trying to like shine a light on for people, is you're the person who I sat down with, like in an intimate setting, and said, I'm going to go through all this stuff. And if you look at it on paper, it's a horror show, but the funny is going to boil up. And it was the most fun to do together. Like you and all the projects I have done, the time that we spent together dissecting that and how much we laughed and how much we left on the cutting room floor is honestly the greatest experience of my life. And this is what I want people really to know. When you have something like that, you need to trust it. I remember we're going down. We never ran the show. Sam, you need to hear it. We never ran the show in its entirety. We do all in its entirety. Maybe an hour before I was taking the curtain for the very first performance, right? And we're in a cab, and we're driving down to the village. And Dion is sitting next to me in his cab, freaking out. He's shaking. He's like, it's going to be great. Yeah, it's fine. It's going to be good. Yeah, we're good. And I had to look at him and go, I got this, man. I got this. You got me ready. You got me ready. And there's something about the arts, theater, and facing your demons. And when you get to either see a movie, you get to hear a stand-up routine, or you get to see a great theatrical play. But when you get to bond with the person who's creating that, and you get to have a shared experience and get to see the shades, dude, that's what makes you such an extraordinary artist. The fact that you showed me a pathway that were footprints that you already laid, that I was comfortable in, it just blows my mind when I think about it.
Wow. Well, I'm glad, man. I'm really glad that you had such a rich experience. You deserve that because you were willing to just bring it all out. And you weren't in like official recovery like I was, where we were used to talking about stuff. You were digging on blind faith, and that this stuff was just going to work out. When I do these corporate gigs where I teach them, the whole group, 400 salespeople, let's say, we'll be in Florida at the Orlando Resort, and I'm teach them within 90 minutes how to do stand-up comedy. And what I have them do first is not worry about what's funny. Don't worry about what's funny about the organization. I borrow the 4 words that Judy Carter uses because I find these to be very true. What's hard, weird, scary, and stupid about this organization? And then I'll have them generate all of this material, but with the hardest, and I teach them the joke writing structure, which is very, it's pretty, so the premise and the setup, punchline, tags, and all that stuff. And then I'll have representatives come up from the group who didn't write the jokes. And so nobody's taking personal responsibility. So what happens is all of this stuff comes out that the organization itself as a living, breathing entity understands to be true. And these people get the biggest laughs that you'll ever hear because they're saying the stuff that needs to be said in this room. And that's what comedy is. It is saying stuff that you can't bear to say it directly sometimes. You've got to sort of edge in on it. But the writer, back to the process you and I went through, I feel the writer has to go to the belly of the beast, find the beating heart of it, the hell realm. That's why in Greek mythology, it's always about going into the underworld, the deepest pit of hell to find this stuff. And, Dante's Inferno, all of this imagery of going way inside to the unknown thing and seeing all of it. Then you can come out the other side and pick and choose which little demon you want to bring forward. But you've been with it. You're not going into it. When I was at that codependency rehab, and that guy challenged me on Saturday morning, 3 hours before we're going to leave, you joke too much. He was right, because I hadn't gone in and found what I was joking in place of. I was joking in place of some real contact with myself and therefore others. So PJ, you went through that experience, which was crazy. I mean, we went through a crazy experience together. But I was with you holding the rope while you rappelled down into the earth and went down in some deep shit and came back up with what was left and what was needed to get the story across. And so that when we get to the final scene, and because we know throughout PJ's story, through a story that I think that's been well explored, it's funny, but that there's this ghost tone, this fifth voice that appears in the barbershop quartet harmony that's like an invisible ghost tone. There's this other tone of tragedy that's hanging in and around this thing. And so that when we're in the last scene and PJ is coming back and he's in a C-130 with caskets that are draped with American flags, he can then hold that space silently. And he doesn't need to make jokes anymore. And we can watch him take all of that in. And what we're taking in is the hidden tragedy that's been in and around this whole story that he's hitting punchlines for, and he's letting us off the hook because he's letting us laugh. But at the end, when we're mourning something in that final scene, we're mourning all of the things that he suffered but didn't make you. He didn't manipulate you and say, I want you to suffer for me. He was the clown. He was the artist who does the suffering for you and turns it around so you can see the insight, have the gift, and not go through the torment. He saves you from that, because that's his work to do. And if I could say anybody that I've ever met did their work in order to have the remainder left for the gift to give the audience, it's PJ. So right back at you.
Man, I appreciate that. And I know that we don't have a lot more time. So definitely what we want to, I feel really good about it. Thank you so much, Dan. I can't even compliment you enough. And like I said, we could do a whole nother thing on that. But what I definitely want to get to for the listeners and Sam is definitely where you reconnected with Jimmy on and where you're getting to now. Because actually what's very interesting is Sam's a meditator. You're a meditator. You introduced me to meditation. And I love the story on that's what you were into. When you were doing like a meditation, manifestation kind of thing and just bumped into Jimmy on the street.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, that's a great way to pick up with just the sort of surface storyline. So it's, I'm in that graduate program and I'm sober and I'm working on this spiritual stuff, with these various teachers and things like that. And I'm looking very deep. I begin my work of looking very deeply inside myself. What has been driving me? The inner inquiry. The inquiry work that we do, where we're no longer looking at others and how they've wronged us. It's like, what did I bring? What has been driving me blindly? So I'm doing that work, and I'm in Midtown, and I'm at my spiritual, teacher at that time's work office, and workplace, and I'm in there, and I walk out. And I was, the first time I'd been in that office, so I was at a place I usually wasn't. I was near Rockefeller Center. And I'm walking east, and someone says, Dion. And I look over, and it's Jimmy. And he's got a guitar on his back. Jimmy doesn't live in New York. Jimmy lives in California. I haven't seen Jimmy for a few years. This would have been 1997, 98. And I go, oh my God. And we hug, and he takes a picture of us with not a smartphone. It's a real camera. And he tells me about this, 7 Spiritual Laws of Success, book of Deepak Chopra that he had found. And he found some cool stuff on the West Coast. And, we were talking, and he had just come from his Saturday Night Live audition. And if you watch that audition, he uses the name Dieter Gutboots, which is a name that I had invented back when we were in Albany. So, awesome. It is awesome. And I was like so honored, that he would, use it. And he told me right there, he's like, oh my God. He's like, I used the name that like you created. And he had always had this vision that he was going to get on Saturday Night Live. That's all he talked about. It's what he wanted. That was his vision. He was one of those guys who was, just had the vision was clear back when we were on the set back in Albany. So I'm the first person that he runs into after he gets out of his audition. Now, you could say that's nothing, or you could say, much like the author of 7 Spiritual Laws of Success talks about in his partnership with Wayne Dyer, that there's this synchronicity that just starts to happen where you just like, you can't control it. You can't make appointments that are this synchronous. Okay. So Jimmy says, we'll exchange numbers and we'll talk and, hopefully fingers crossed, hope you get it. And I was like, I'm sure you'll get it. Well, he called me in August. Dion, I got it. I was like, oh my God, I'm so happy. I never had any doubts. That's so awesome. We talked for 90 minutes. I'm in my college dorm over the summer and he's in California. We threatened to get together when he gets to the city. He calls me once he gets there. And I tried to call him back a little bit later, and Jimmy began to become a star, and I began to become really in contact with a lot of demons inside that needed addressing. So I had to put my career and stuff on hold for a while. So that would have been 97, 98. Jimmy's star began to rise, and the Jimmy Fallon story that we all know. So I had a buddy, Josh Radnor, who was in my class at NYU, and I said to him many times, I said, Josh, I got this buddy, Jimmy, and you look like him. It's so weird that you guys look alike. And now everybody on the internet says that, but I was the first one to say it. And so I said it to him, and he said, oh, it's funny. And I said, but this guy, I said, watch it, he's going to be a star. There's no way he's not going to be a star. And so Jimmy becomes a star, Josh becomes a star, and I'm dealing with all this stuff, and I'm newly dealing with all this sadness and grief and things that come up when you first get sober, the first 5-10 years. I mean, it's a really tremendous, change. And so, I had some successes. I had some couple things happen, a couple little breakthrough things here and there. And I was in therapy in 2010. And I'd finished up therapy at the VA, and I'd finished with this therapist I'd been working with for like a year and a half, and it was a very successful therapy. And I'm in food recovery, and I'm in all these different recoveries, and I'm kind of a mess by most people's standards on the outside to need all these meetings and this therapy and this food, eating in a certain way. And by civilian standards, it would appear that I was just kind of cuckoo. But I understood that those were the things I needed to just continue to live and face life as it is. So I'm sitting in the cafeteria of the Veterans Hospital, and there's big tall windows, and the sun is coming in, and I'm eating my meal because I just had my final session, and I'm thinking to myself, this personal sequestration that I have undergone from show business, I think I might be ready. Like I think I might be ready to maybe do something now, because I feel like interpersonal things, I've grown, and a lot of my inner demons. And I think I'm ready. And no sooner than I kind of come to that thought, I get a text from my friend Josh Radnor. And, he and I have been friends, throughout the whole time. We text and speak many times each day. And he's a big star, and he's releasing films, and he had been on How I Met Your Mother for 9 seasons. And he texts me, he goes, hey, I'm going to be a guest on Fallon. Should I say hi to your old friend? Now, I think I always said to myself, he was giving me one last chance to say, well, I didn't really know him that well, and maybe you shouldn't mention me. so that nobody gets embarrassed. But I, in fact, said, of course, oh my God, yes, say hi. And I'm piecing this all together, And I had thought many times about approaching Jimmy, but I was like, I can't approach him until I have something to give. And I just got too many demons and stuff. I would be asking for too much. It would be asking too much for me to approach him any earlier than this day. And I hung up the phone and I said, yeah, you can definitely say hi to Jimmy. All is well with the world. And then I thought, maybe the thought arrived while I'm sitting in that cafeteria at the Veterans Hospital. But I was like, you know what? I think I am really ready. Maybe I could go say hi myself. I texted Josh back. I said, Josh, could I maybe go with you and just be like part of your entourage? And he said, of course. Meet me down here and such. I went down, met him at the hotel. SUV comes, picks us up, drives us up to 30 Rock, right where Jimmy and I had, met. He's now inside, got his own show for a little while now. And I go up to the dressing room. Well, now I'm having a terrible feeling inside because I'm at this weird place of thinking, is he going to really remember me? I mean, he'll remember me. Of course, it'd be weird to think, but you haven't been around somebody for 10, 12, 13 years. And, I don't know, as he become a big star, maybe he'll just be like, oh yeah, hey. He comes into that dressing room and he said, my God, Dion Flynn, where have you been? And he said to everybody that would listen, my friend Josh included, this is one of the funniest guys I know. And he hugged me up, and he was, the Jimmy that people sometimes criticize because they're like, how can this guy be so positive? But that's the Jimmy I've always known. He has an unbelievable source of energy bubbling through him, which is, you can't account for it in any easily explainable way. And he grabbed me up and they went out and did the segment, and I watched from the dressing room. And I guess, I'm crying because it's I don't know. I guess because I was in some kind of larger story that whole time, and I was always being cared for. And, I never really had to worry. And then I worried so many times, And anyway, so Jimmy sends a producer backstage to get my information, and with the message that, hey, we'd like to maybe have you come in and do some segments and some bits on the show. And I get too nervous about it. And I submit a writer's packet instead of doing what he said. And the writer's packet was just like politely, ignored because I hadn't really got into my joke writing at that point yet. And I was afraid to make that plunge, that next plunge. And so I was meeting with some people who were helping me along the way, these people that are sort of in my, recovery world. And they said, well, let's list some things that you can do to earn and, and do the next phase of your life and whatever. And I said, well, I know this guy and that guy. And they were like, what? You know these people? And I was like, yeah, but this I can't, and blah, blah, blah. And they said, well, write down that you'll at least, reach out. And they said, all right. And that's the day that I invented the things I refuse to ever do list. Tired, TIRED, things I refuse ever doing. If somebody gives me a good idea and I can't write it down because I want to dismiss it, I don't dismiss it anymore. I write it down on things I refuse to fucking do. And then I just write it down, and I wrote down get in contact again. So I'd let this thing lapse by trying to sidetrack what my real talent was. And I reconnected in a more pointed way, and I said, da-da-da-da-da, and I got on the show, and I did a little side piece. The first little piece I did was a desk piece where I was a guy reporting on passwords. Jimmy was TikTok. It was called TikTok Tech Talk, and Jimmy was the host, and then he threw to me, and I talked about passwords, and I inadvertently gave away all my passwords on national television. That was the bit. That was the bit. And then I did, about 12 or 14 of these various sketches and stuff on Late Night with Jimmy Fallon. And somebody kind of looked at my head shape one day, my ears, and my skin tone and my height and my hair length. And they were like, do you think, they were kind of looking past me and through me. And they were like, one of the producers like, do you think you could do Obama? And I was like, and you're an actor, you know, so you're like, yeah, sure. And so I did that and I tried that. And that just took everything to a whole new level, because once you play a character that everybody knows, you may not know this, but once you play a former president on television, you get listed in Wikipedia like people who have played presidents on television, and people want you at their IPOs and their weddings and their deathbeds. I got called as Obama to go to a deathbed one time. And it just really took off for my career of going into places and writing for people and writing, because as Obama, I would roast people. Even the woman that was on her deathbed, I roasted her with information that I got from the family, and I pretended like Obama had all the information from the National Security Administration, that we had been eavesdropping on everything. So look, it's just a lot of like, yes, just saying yes to the next thing and not ignoring these weird coincidences. And there's a moment that I have to acknowledge here, which is when Jimmy started to throw to me. And this is the one thing where reluctantly over the years I've had to just own, because I always try to throw the credit to Jimmy or to my other friends or to something else. It's that when Jimmy throws to me and the light goes on and it's my camera and I'm the only one on NBC, I have to come forward. Like Jimmy can love me and does with all of his might, but if I don't bring something forward when the light is just me, he can't save me. And that's my moment. You know, you get your moment, and that's what you learn. You know, it's like your moment. You're not stepping on anybody else's moment. It's your moment. And when it's your moment, you got to bring your talent out. And there's nothing humble about not bringing all your talent forward when the light goes on and it's your moment. So that's one of many, many big lessons I've learned about being a performer, is that it doesn't serve anybody to play small when it's actually your moment.
Well, Dion, thank you. That's one of the more incredible stories that I've ever heard. So I'm grateful for you sharing, and
You're very welcome.
So, Dion, I do want to get to our closing question, which is, how do you want to be remembered?
As a guy who knew that all was well and that all was funny.
All right. Dion Flynn, thank you so much for joining In Stitches.
You're very welcome, guys. It's such a pleasure.
Dion, I do have a suggestion for your tombstone, though, before you leave.
Oh, what do you got?
Here lies Dieter Gutboots.
Dieter Gut Boots. Oh my God! Watch Jimmy's audition for SNL, and you'll hear him say it. It's so funny. It's like an honor for me. I've written other lines and stuff that have appeared on the show and whatever, but that one is that means a lot to me. That one.
That's awesome.
I love you to death, D. I love you to death.
I love you too, brother. Thank you.
Man, Dion is. We could have kept going. Like, we're going to have him back. Sam, there's no way we can't have, because there's so much more to him besides what everyone just heard.
I mean, you can see the thoughtfulness with which he's explored every facet of his life in the way that he, did that interview, and also the way that he explored humor. I really appreciated the part where I made an observation around humor potentially being maybe not a positive coping mechanism, and then kind of having to confront more of the tragic elements of his life in acting school. And I loved how he pushed back on that and said how important humor was for him in that moment in time, and how thoughtful he was around that.
Oh yeah. And then we didn't even get into what an amazing improv actor he is. There's so many facets to his talent. It's just, and the insecurity, that's what kind of really got me, the fact that he was just kind of not confident in what he taking that step, even with Jimmy. But the thing I really appreciated with his relationship with Jimmy Fallon is, I mean, there's nobody like the people you're in the trenches with in the beginning. Mm-hmm. You will V-line across the room to see somebody that was in the trenches. So to see that relationship come, and to see him come from a little trailer park, like only brown kid in the trailer park, to portraying the first African-American president, unto that entire journey is just, man, awesome. And I use that word a lot.
It is awesome. And it's not over. And I think you get that feeling when you speak with Dion, is it's, one step at a time. It's kind of every day you're a work in progress and kind of inventing yourself again. And just hearing that throughout the conversation.
All right, Sam. Well, we couldn't do this alone. There's a lot of people we need to thank behind the scenes.
Yeah. I mean, Dion for making the time while he's got a whole homeschool going on upstairs in Brooklyn, being present and vulnerable and just hysterical with us. And our executive producer, David Bobrow, for planning all of this, for putting it all together, for making us look way better than we actually are. So thank y'all.
And of course, everybody who's listening. We are on social media now, and please like and share us at all these platforms.
Instagram and Twitter, you can get us at In Stitches Pod, and on Facebook, we're the In Stitches Podcast. So like, share, follow, subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts, because we're going to have new episodes coming out, and we want to make sure that you can catch them.
And we'll have it all in the show notes.
Maybe.
Hopefully. God willing, Sam.
All right. I think we did it. I think that was enough. This has been In Stitches.